right, welcome again yet to another webinar by Reach Law. This time we'll talk about Ecodesign for sustainable products, regulation, and the related digital product passport. So without further ado, Tim, if you take the next slide, please. We have three presenters, albeit I will just be a mere moderator here. My colleague Tim Becker and then Shailendra Mudgal, who I asked to introduce themselves to you. Please, Tim, start with you, please.
Yes, thank you. Hello from Helsinki, Finland. So yes, my name is Tim Becker. I'm a German qualified lawyer by training and have been working as a senior legal advisor with Reach Law. My main work focus has been on the EU REACH regulation and related EU and non-EU laws governing chemicals and environmental sustainability. I have more than 15 years of experience in the field and have done quite extensive work to help industries and governmental agencies to address regulatory impacts, and especially on complex products which rely on hazardous substances. So happy to be here today and talk about ESPR.
Thank you, Tim. And to our guest speaker, Shailendra, if you please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Frederick. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Shailendra Mudgal. I'm representing here the consortium SURPASS. I'm a consultant based in Paris, so working with Bio-Innovation Service, and I have been working for more than 25 years now on different environmental and energy policies. In the case of Ecodesign, I have been involved since the very beginning when the directive EUP, or the Ecodesign for energy using products, was adopted in 2005, and I worked on more than 25 different products and sectors in this context. And I was also involved in the development of what became ESPR now, that was Sustainable Product Initiative. So I'll be happy to present the SURPASS and the DPP related presentation and then answer any of the questions you might have.
Thank you, Shailendra. And I'm Fredrik Johansson. I'm a partner, head of sales at Reach Law, so I will be just a mere moderator today. So together with these two subject matter experts. So if you take the next slide, please, Tim. So just some practical information pertaining to this webinar. So you will be able to send questions using the chat function in the panel to the right or left, depending on where you have it. And of course, we will be answering those questions during the Q&A at the end, and we will also be answering the questions you have been submitting in advance. So we'll start with those during the Q&A session. And if you believe they are not sufficiently answered during this webinar, then please feel free to reach out to Tim Becker, as you see on the screen here, Tim Becker at reachlaw.fi. And as you probably are used to by now, we will be posting these webinars on our YouTube channel called Reach Law Talks within a couple of days, well, next week, this time, so you will be able to watch the recording there. And of course, we appreciate very much if you can send us feedback. Anything you think we should do better and so forth, please let us know. Next slide, please. So we have a very busy agenda today. We expect this to be taking around 90 minutes. So we'll start with a quick overview of Reach Law. I'll do that. Then I will hand it over to Tim to go through the ESPR and the interface with other laws. He will also talk about key requirements and actors on the market, and the main products affected and timelines and next steps. And then we'll hand over to our guest speaker to talk about the digital product passport and look at SURPASS activities. And then we'll hand back to Tim to go through the conclusions and action plan and look at Reach Law services related to ESPR and DPP. And then we'll conclude with a Q&A where we go through these pre-submitted questions and the questions you've submitted. And I will try to, let's say, prioritize questions that are of common benefit to all attendees. So if it's a very specific question to your specific line of business, please just feel free to reach out directly to Tim or myself with those questions. And then we conclude. So 90 minutes or more or less this time for this webinar. Next slide, please. So let's look at REACH law quickly. So next slide, please. For those of you who do not know us yet, so today it's a green color due to sustainability related topics. Our focus and our locations are on the map. So we specialize obviously in chemical regulatory compliance, but now also on advocacy and sustainability related issues. And today, of course, sustainability will be a top of this hierarchy, albeit with a hint of chemical regulations also. So we have offices in 7 countries, head offices here in Helsinki in Finland, and where we service EU REACH and CLP related topics and many other things like ESPR, for example, DPP. But we also have offices around the world to provide local services for chemical regulations we support, such as UK region in the UK, where we have our Manchester office. Then we have an office in Turkey, in Istanbul, for KKDIK related services and SEA related services. And in South Korea, in Seoul, for K-REACH, K-OSHA related topics, and also in India, mostly servicing local India companies, but also pertaining to India BIS, which is a requirement there. If you're placing certain chemical products or products on the market, they have to comply with these certain standards. And then the latest newcomer to our portfolio of offices, if you will, is Kiev, Ukraine, for Ukraine REACH and CLP purposes, which we will actually have a webinar on the 25th this month. So sign up if you haven't done so already. And we have a small office also in Belgium, albeit through that we mostly service IT related solutions. So next slide, please, Tim. So we're not a new company. We're not an old company either, established in 2006 here in Helsinki, very close to the chemical agency. But now, as you saw on the map, we already expanded to 7 countries. We have a mix of different professionals, over 50 of them working in our offices around the world. Multidisciplinary team from chemists to technical people, lawyers such as Tim, for example, toxicologist, ecotoxicologist, and socioeconomic analysts, and so forth. So all of the professionals you need to help you as companies complying with these chemical regulations. For those places and jurisdictions where we don't have our own offices, we work through an extensive partner network, such as Latin American countries, Asian countries, certain Asian countries where we're not located, US, Canada, and so forth. And we have a vast number of clients in different industries. We service them all. Here's a list of some of them, but we do not discriminate any industries. We work with all of them. All the major ones, smaller ones, specialty ones. I think probably more exotic ones are the aerospace and defense sectors and so forth. But more information you will always find on the reachlaw.fi webpage, so I invite you to have a look there. Next slide, please. And this slide just goes to show the typical services we have and are providing for market access and sustainability related topics. So obviously, as where we started, and the name implies, REACH and REACH-like chemical regulations globally, we are functioning as an only representative for these, most of the REACH and REACH-like chemical regulations. That's the core of our business, albeit nowadays we do much more also, as is the, for example, the subject of this webinar, ESPR. We do all the work that is required and needed, for example, for complying with these chemical regulations and more. So all the demanding and less demanding work, but to just give an example of the more demanding work, such as lead registration work, authorization, and so forth. We also provide consultancy on many other topics and training and so forth. But Tim will go through the sustainability related services at the end of the presentation, so I will leave that up to him. So if you take the next slide, please. And as you saw during the one slide earlier, we do have a YouTube channel called Reach Law Talks, where we upload all our webinar material and more. So if you want to have a look at our webinars from the past and this one coming up in a week or so, please head over to Reach Law Talks. And of course, if you like, please subscribe. And if you really like, give a thumbs up. And if you give a thumbs up, it just will mean that it will recommend these type of topics in your YouTube feed going forward. So next slide, please, Tim. So as we are quite busy going to different events around the world, we will be available in these events. The first one has already passed, so that is gone, but the next one is Chemical Conference in the UK, where our UK team will be end of September. Then we will be at the Chemical Watch Global Chemical Regulatory Updates in Brussels later on. Then there are certain events in Korea happening where our Korean team will be participating. And then we have Turk Chem, which is a big fair in Istanbul in Turkey, where, for example, I will be present. So if you are there, please come by our booth and say hello. And also Korea Circular Economy Festival later on this year, which sounds very interesting. Probably not like the festivals I was attending in my youth. But anyway, next slide, please. And a final disclaimer and copyright to make the lawyers happy, including Tim, I suspect. So of course, all the content in this presentation is for general information purposes only, and does not substitute professional consultancy. So if you need specific support, then please consult professional consultants such as Reach Law on these particular topics. So we will not take any liability for actions you may take. So it's on your risk. And we have no representation or warranties made on the completeness or accuracy of the contents of this presentation. I will accept no liabilities, obviously, and the usual copyright notice at the end. So with this, I will terminate my video feed and hand over to Tim to go through the main topic of this webinar. So Tim, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Fedi, for the introduction to Reach Law. And so I will now go a little bit through the ESPR regulation, the requirements as they were now finalized and entered into force over the summer. And so I will basically then set the scene also for Shailendra to talk about the digital product passport and the state of play and the Surpass 2 activities in agenda point 6 of this webinar. And yeah, as already introduced by Fedi, then afterwards we will wrap up and have some time, hopefully a good amount of time for questions and answers. Okay, so what is ESPR? So ESPR is a European regulation which now entered into force on the 18th of July this year. It was previously signed on the 13th of June and published in the official journal of the European Union on the 28th of June. And as you can see here from the title of the regulation, it is a framework regulation. So it establishes framework rules for the setting of eco-design requirements for sustainable products. And at the same time, the regulation repeals the Ecodesign directive, subject to some transitional provisions. The aim of the ESPR is to improve the environmental sustainability of products which are placed on the market or put into service in the EU, in order to make sustainable products the norm and to reduce their overall carbon and environmental footprint over their life cycle. The ESPR also establishes a digital product passport, so-called DPP. It furthermore provides for the setting of mandatory green public procurement requirements, and it also creates a framework to prevent unsold consumer products from being destroyed. So what is interesting about this regulation is that it really governs virtually all the products, all the physical goods which are placed on the market or put into service in the EU. There are only some limited exclusions and exemptions, which I will address a bit later. ESPR will also affect companies and products both from inside the EU and also imported products. So non-EU actors will also very much involved and impacted. Given that this is a framework regulation, the details on the requirements need to be still specified in the future in European Commission delegated acts for specific product groups according to a working plan. And in addition, there is also the possibility for a horizontal requirement to regulate a little bit more broadly across similar product groups, eco-design aspects. The type of requirements under ESPR can be information and or performance requirements, and I will address this a little bit more shortly. And yeah, as you can also see, given the reference to environmental sustainability, the ESPR as of now does not cover social aspects. But after 4 years, the Commission should evaluate also the inclusion of those social sustainability aspects into the regulation. So yeah, when promoting the present webinar, we have asked companies a number of questions, and we have asked you about the main challenges that you face with regards to ESPR. And in fact, you have reported a very great diversity of challenges, which I have here tried to group into main topics. So most companies are in fact unsure whether, when, and how ESPR could impact their products and business, and what resources you will need to comply. There are also many questions about the interface with other laws, such as the REACH regulation on chemicals, but also with regard to specific product legislation, packaging, waste, and so on. Then furthermore, the implementation of the DPP, of course, is raising many questions as a new digital tool to transmit information. So here, participants have questions on the technical aspects, of course, on the contents, but also the data management, which will be needed to gather all the information. And yeah, to conclude, we can say that there are indeed lots of unknowns still at the moment. This is mainly because this regulation is defined as a framework regulation, and the implementation by the European Commission is only starting now. So as I already said, the ESPR is addressing environmental sustainability of products placed on the market in the EU or put into service. And we should not forget that in addition to ESPR, there are also a number of other sustainability requirements that have now been introduced in the EU. This was mainly inspired by the European Green Deal of 2019. And to just give a recent example, another recent example, there is the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive now, which also entered into force during the summer. This CSDDD established a so-called due diligence duty for certain large companies in order to identify and address adverse human rights and environmental impacts for a company's own operations, its subsidiaries, and business partners. So that is certainly some very impacting piece of law and a piece of legislation as well. In addition, I want to mention the EU Green Claims Directive, which is currently still in the process of being put into law, and which aims to protect consumers from so-called greenwashing. However, here this Green Claims Directive will not apply directly in business-to-business relationships. But okay, just to let you know and to be aware that there are many concurrent requirements that have to be checked and attended in order to see whether there is an impact. Now, many questions are raised in terms of the relationship with chemical safety laws, such as REACH and CLP regulations. In fact, this interface is addressed with quite great attention in the final text of the ESPR. And here the recital 26 starts by saying that also the chemical safety is, of course, a recognized element of product sustainability. However, this being said, chemical safety is already addressed by existing union laws on chemicals, such as REACH, CLP, and also the requirements on SKIP. So therefore, in order to avoid double regulation, the final ESPR text clarifies that ESPR should not provide for the restriction of substances based primarily on chemical safety, because so that's mainly the job of REACH to do. Instead, the ESPR may address impacts on environmental sustainability that are unrelated to chemical safety. And in addition to that, ESPR may and will also set information requirements concerning the presence of so-called substances of concern throughout their life cycle. And here the DPP will have a special role in order to enhance the environmental sustainability in a broader sense. So the information requirements under ESPR will come initially on top of the existing requirements that we know from REACH and CLP, such as safety data sheets, CLP labels, and also the reporting to the SKIP database for candidate list SVHCs in articles. But in here we have to see how the Commission will be able to make the links between ESPR information requirements and existing information requirements in order to explore efficiencies and increase consistency. So we have to see how this will be done in practice. Now a little bit on the key requirements and actors under ESPR. So Ecodesign requirements under ESPR may regulate a great number of product aspects throughout the whole life cycle of a product. So you see them listed here on the slide. So we have now 16 product aspects for environmental sustainability, which are listed in the final text. I have tried to group them a little bit based on what they address. Is it the lifetime composition, resource use, etc. But it's not grouped like this in the legal text. But we can see that, of course, the scope in terms of possible regulatory requirements is going far beyond the energy efficiency aspect, which has been the focus under the previous Ecodesign directive. So, and main product aspects, which are frequently quoted, of course, which should be now regulated, are the durability, recyclability, and also the recycled content in products. So so in a way, all these aspects describe the criteria for an environmentally sustainable product. And I think it's important to point out that not all of these aspects have to be regulated for each product group, but only the most relevant ones from a sustainability perspective. So you may consider this list as a big list for the Commission to regulate products in order to enhance their environmental sustainability. Okay, I already introduced that there are information requirements and performance requirements under ESPR, or will be. And so these requirements may be either product specific, or they may be horizontal requirements covering several product groups with sufficient technical commonalities. With regards to the performance requirements, they may be either quantitative or qualitative. So, for example, quantitative requirements may be minimum recycled content or a limit of energy used. And in terms of non-quantitative requirements, we can think, for example, about the restriction of a substance in a product which inhibits a circular use. Yeah, so performance requirements will basically be used to ensure the removal of the worst performing products from the EU market. And there will be a dedicated process to establish those performance requirements, and there will be also a detailed analysis prior to the adoption of such requirements, and these assessments are set out in Annex 2 to ESPR. And for example, there's a requirement for a technical, environmental, and economic analysis. So it will be quite a detailed check to be done to see which requirements are needed and how should they be defined. Then, other than the performance requirements, we have the information requirements, and those should include at least provisions for so-called substances of concern and for the digital product passports. And on top of that, there may also be the need for additional information to be included, for example, on the performance of products, the handling, recycling, just in order to influence sustainable product choices and use. So that much for an overview about the possible requirements in general. And now a few words about the concept of substances of concern. So in cases where information requirements are set under the ESPR, they should include, as I mentioned, requirements on the presence of substances of concern in products. And this is just because, of course, information on the presence of substances of concern in products is a key element to identify and promote products that are sustainable. And as you can see from the legal text in Article 227, there are now 4 independent subgroups of substances of concern. So whenever one subgroup is fulfilled, this can be a substance of concern in a product or in a subsequent Commission delegated act. So first of all, we have the REACH candidate list substances, of course, already known well from the REACH regulation and the reporting obligations there. Then second, we have CLP-based substances of concern. So there are substances which have a certain harmonized classification according to the EU CLP regulations. So we see that there are like 8 human health and 5 environmental criteria. So this is actually, this subgroup is adding a lot of new substances in the scope of future substance reporting. It's a very broad category and could indeed have a major impact for the supply chains in terms of substance reporting. Then third, we have the substances regulated under the EU regulation on persistent organic pollutants, so-called POPs. This third group has been added during the co-legislative process, so it was not yet there in the Commission proposal. And then last but not least, we have the substances inhibiting circularity. So I call them circularity-based SOCs. And here, a detailed case-by-case assessment is required by the European Commission for each product group concerned in order to determine which substances are SOCs based on this this fourth subgroup, in that they negatively affect the reuse and recycling of materials in the products in which they are present. So it will be interesting to see how the Commission will tackle that clause. So this figure now is giving you like an illustration of the scope, but also the limitation of the concept of substances of concern as defined in the ESPR. And here I also have tried to place the concept in relation to other concepts that are out there under REACH and the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability. So such as the candidate list, but also the concept of most harmful substances for essential use. So, but importantly, this illustration should also show you that that not all the substances or not all this like harmful chemicals or chemicals of concern are captured by the substances of concern definition. So, for example, if you think about an important case such as PFAS, there are actually many of those PFAS chemicals which are not fulfilling, which are not on the candidate list or are not do not have a harmonized classification in CLP, or are not yet on listed in the POPs regulation. So they are currently not captured by this SOC definition. And this has actually been identified as a concern, because also like the information about PFAS in supply chains, especially more downstream, is still fairly limited. So I think it's good to be aware of those limitations of even the wide SOC concept. And I also wanted to point out that the SOC definition under ESPR is not the only one. There are also SOCs defined in other EU laws, and those definitions are not necessarily the same. For example, we have now the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive with the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which have an SOC definition. We have an understanding in the batteries regulation, which was adopted and entered into force last year, and also, for example, in the biocides regulation, we have a different definition, and also the skip reporting under the Waste Framework Directive actually refers to the limited notion of candidate list substances. So actually, it's a very complex topic. And REACH law has made an article on it, substances of concern in EU law, and it should be published shortly. So please be a little bit patient, but it may be interesting to some, if not many of you. Now, how can substances of concern be regulated under the ESPR? I already mentioned that they can be subject to information requirements and or performance requirements. And then in the latter case, they take the form of restrictions. And the Commission in a webinar of May this year have shared their view that by default, all the substances of concern are to be tracked. However, at the same time, the delegated acts should define threshold and exemptions from the tracking requirement where relevant. Yeah. And then when we look at the performance requirements, there may be restrictions for sustainability reasons, which are focusing on the product aspects, which I have mentioned above. But I should recall again that the restrictions under ESPR should not provide or not limit substances based primarily on chemical safety, because this is already done by other laws such as REACH. So that's also acknowledged clearly here by the Commission. Now, big topic, of course, DPP. And this is something that will be covered more in detail by Shailendra. I just want to say here that indeed the digital product passport is seen as the future information system of the circular economy, gathering a lot of mandatory and also voluntary information and transmitting it in the value chains. So let's wait for Shailendra to tell us a bit more about it, and I'm sure there will also be questions in the Q&A. Okay, which actors are affected by ESPR? So ESPR duty holders are actually so-called economic operators along the value chain. These are mainly the product manufacturers. So they may be within the EU or outside. And then secondly, we have the EU importers, we have distributors and dealers. And so these are the main economic operators. And the ESPR compliance obligations, so the duties are adapted to these different supply chain roles. And here, of course, the product manufacturer, who has the most detailed knowledge of the design and the production of the process, is the principal duty holder. So he's responsible, or he will be responsible for the conformity assessment and the technical documentation, and also for preparing the digital product passport. And the manufacturers, especially non-EU manufacturers, may appoint so-called EU authorized representatives. But this concept is not to be confused with the only representative under EU REACH. The authorized representative will have a limited mandate, which will mainly be in relation to specific tasks such as reporting to competent national authorities in the EU. So whereas of course manufacturers, including non-EU manufacturers, will be addressed under ESPR, it will be for the EU importers to ensure that the products that they place on the market in the EU comply with the rules set up on conformity assessment requirements, CE marking, and other documentation drawn up by the manufacturers, and that all these documents are available for inspection by the competent national authorities. And importers will also have to ensure, where applicable, that a digital product passport is available for those products. Then further down in the supply chain, I still want to mention distributors, which basically, based on the ESPR text, shall act with due care in relation to eco-design requirements, and this is then specified more in detail in the law what this should mean. Now, looking at the enforcement of ESPR to ensure that the rules are followed. In fact, the Commission, already in its proposal, but also the co-legislators, Parliament and Council, have paid special attention to enforcement provisions, because they really want to ensure a level playing field and an effective application of ESPR and its delegated acts. The enforcement measures will be generally based on the EU market surveillance regulation, which will be complemented by some ESPR provisions. And it will be for the member states to lay down penalties for non-compliance, and this will also include fines. So, and it will be for the market surveillance authorities in the member states to enforce the product compliance rules in the internal market. And then we have still the customs authorities, which will be in charge of controlling products entering the union market, European Union market. And then the European Commission will also have an important role as it will be in charge of the DPP registry and may organize joint market surveillance and testing projects in areas of common interest. And then I also want to mention that the co-legislators have introduced a so-called consumer redress to claim compensation for non-compliance damage from the product manufacturers, EU importers, or authorized representatives, or also fulfillment service providers, the so-called private enforcement. So it's an interesting provision which may also enhance the pressure to be really compliant with future eco-design measures. Okay. Now, looking a little bit at the main products affected by ESPR, the Commission already in the beginning of 2023 had launched an online public consultation on what the new product priorities under the ESPR should be. So this was based on a preliminary analysis by the Commission's Joint Research Center. And this preliminary GRC report is publicly available. And in this report, 19 product groups were shortlisted, including 7 intermediate products and 12 end-use products. And we have not seen yet the final report based on the outcome of the public consultation. However, in the meantime, the priority products for the first ESPR working plan have been clarified in the ESPR final text, and this you see reflected here. I just took a shot of the regulation here of Article 18, paragraph 5, where you see the 11 product groups. Which should appear in the first ESPR working plan of the European Commission to be adopted by April next year. And so, yeah, it's if you compare it, for example, with the products which were analyzed by the Joint Research Center in the study that I mentioned previously, you will see that not all of those products are shortlisted here in the regulation. But we should keep in mind that this is not a fixed list. So it's possible, for example, to not include, for the Commission to not include certain product groups in the first ESPR working plans. And it's also possible that next April there will be other product groups appearing in this working plan. So it's still work in progress. Commission has to, of course, justify their decisions if they deviate from this list, which I show you here. But I think this is now the starting point. So if you are dealing with any of those products or have those in your supply chain, then you may have to look into ESPR a little bit more closely. I just want to briefly highlight the example of chemicals. So if basically ESPR states that chemicals should be prioritized for the first working plan, it does not necessarily mean all chemicals. So here it's worthwhile to look back into the JRC study, and you can see more insights about so what is actually seen as priority chemicals part of this group. So it really the product groups may be further subscoped in order to define to work on eco-design requirements. So it will be more granular than you think, than you may think. So this is all work in progress still, and yeah, I can really recommend you take a look at this if not already done, at this JRC study from last year. And I don't know if a final outcome, a final study is still to be expected. Then I already mentioned that there may be the possibility of horizontal requirements, and I just mentioned it because there's a lot of talking about product-specific requirements, but it will be interesting to see to what extent Commission is going for those horizontal rules, because they would allow like a little bit to cover a broader scope of technically similar products in the requirements as part of the same delegated act. So here this is just I just reflect some information from the European Commission from their webinar this May, and so they're actually looking into horizontal measures for some of the products. Okay, and then I still want to show you some ESPR exclusions and exemptions. So almost all the products are covered in ESPR or maybe addressed by Ecodesign measures, but there are a number of exemptions and exclusions which are set out in the regulation in the beginning of the legal texts. We have the examples of food, feed, and medicinal products. Then during the co-legislative process, a provision was included, also Article 5, Paragraph 5, for products whose sole purpose is to serve defense or national security. So those products shall be excluded from product groups. There is a rationale for this is given in the recitals, and but it has to be defense-only product. So this may not necessarily cover dual use applications. And then if you look at the right-hand side, you can see what I already mentioned on the limitations of the requirements with regards to reasons relating primarily to chemical safety. So here the performance requirements should not be set for those. And on information requirements for substances of concern, there's actually quite a lot of possible flexibility for the European Commission to introduce duly justified exemptions from information requirements based on technical feasibility, relevance of tracking. So you see it here. I just reflect the legal text. But so that will be quite a flexible tool for the Commission to introduce also exemptions from reporting where duly justified. Okay, and now still quickly on timeline and next steps. So the next big step is for the Commission to establish the so-called Ecodesign Forum, which is a multi-stakeholder forum which should support the preparation of eco-design requirements and also the working plans, now starting with the first working plan. So we are waiting that the Commission is launching the calls for membership for this eco-design forum. I think it will be an important group to help assist in the definition of those requirements. And then when we look how are eco-design measures prepared, yes, everything starts with the working plan, the first one due by next April. And then based on it, there will be and are already ongoing to some extent preparatory studies and an impact assessment, which are being discussed in the Ecodesign Forum, which I just mentioned, including its member state expert group. And all of this process will be leading to the adoption of eco-design measures, which would then apply after a minimum of 18 months after adoption. And so it's important to understand here that stakeholders will be involved throughout the process. Industry can participate and can influence the definition of those requirements. And I also flag for you here like a list of negative criteria from the regulation, which is probably something that industry will use quite often, also as a means to say that maybe certain requirements are not feasible because they have a negative impact on the functionality, health and safety, or or just too expensive to or disproportionate to put in practice. So here, an overview of the ESPR implementation timeline. So as I already mentioned, we are now waiting for the Ecodesign forum to be established, and then there will be the first forum meeting at probably at the beginning of 2025. I already mentioned the first working plan, which is due by April, and then the timeline continues and becomes a little bit more more unspecific as far as the delegated acts are concerned. But we can be sure that that the implementation will be tackled seriously. Yes, and with this, Shailendra, I'll give the floor to you to explain a little bit about Surpass 2 and the DPP.
Thank you, Tim. So starting from what Tim explained already, that some of the challenges are, I would say, they are not relatively new, because the companies or the sectors which were already under Ecodesign directive, existing one, the energy related products, they are familiar with those challenges, and I think there have been a learning curve both for the Commission, for the member states, as well as for the companies, how to tackle them. But I think the new elements what ESPR brought was, on one hand, the information requirements go beyond what was already in the form of, it was called generic eco-design requirements, and I think in order to help the compliance also, because quite often the information required for the market surveillance was not easily available. And so existing regulations under eco-design are, I would say, rather static, and that's why the introduction of these requirements, in particular DPP, make the whole process dynamic. Also, it integrates the whole supply chain, which earlier was kind of implicit, but now it's more explicit. And one major difference also compared to eco-design in terms of scope was that earlier only the end products were in the scope, not the intermediate products. So that also expands the scope a lot. But I think the main principles still remain the same. How to choose the products which will come in the scope means the product which have a larger, I would say, market share, the products with significant environmental impacts, and at the same time they have a significant potential for improvement. So that kind of sums up the philosophy of eco-design. So coming to Surpass, I think it's a second phase of Surpass project. Surpass was circular passport. Initially it was called that way. So the previous one, it started in 2022 and it finished earlier this year. So that one was a more coordination and support action, means we were trying to help Commission in establishing the background and how they could learn from kind of pilot actions which the Commission could take into account when developing digital product passport requirements. So that one was funded under Horizon Europe, if you're familiar. So these kind of funding is you get funding to bring together the key actors, and then it's basically collecting information and demonstrating how that information can be used. Now in the second Surpass we have started, so this comes under as an innovation action, so it's different compared to CSA. So we have a large number of partners here, more than 50 partners are involved, and the idea is to really demonstrate what DPP could do and how it could be implemented in particular in specific sectors, so electronics, textiles, tires, and construction. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have a very big consortium here. So we, Bioinnovation Service, are also part of this consortium. So on one hand, we have the active partners, so which are in white, which were also in the previous one. In the yellow are the new partners. But then also we have a kind of ecosystem of different pilots. So I'll come to these pilots a little later. And then we also have expert working groups. So we have 6 different groups looking at different aspects of DPP. So we'll discuss later about that. So next slide, please. So just to explain you the overall community of Surpass 2, the stakeholder, it's quite big, quite actively involved. However, we are still, I would say, at the beginning of this Surpass 2. So the project was started theoretically in May, but in reality, it's kicking off now after the summer break. So we have about 50 consortium partners, but then these have a pilot ecosystem. We have more than 100 partners. So just to explain that only the consortium partners are being funded by the Commission. So the pilots are more voluntary organizations which wants to test the process we are developing. And then we have 2 kind of groups. One is called expert working group, and then you have community of practice. I think one major difference between the Surpass 1 and Surpass 2 is Surpass 1 was looking at the overall DPP requirement towards supply chain, so both upstream and downstream. But here now we are looking mostly at downstream. So once you have a DPP, how it will be used and implemented by the downstream partners or used by the downstream actors in the supply chain. So next slide, please. So the main issue the Commission was saying how we can develop an DPP system which is kind of generic, so it can be adapted to different products groups, product sectors, which on one hand is to comply to the regulatory requirement of the different regulations, so not just ESPR, but for example, the battery regulation also mentions the DPP. In fact, batteries will be the very first where we'll see a DPP to come in light, and then also to see how these DPPs can be flexible or extensible to go beyond the mandatory data exchanges, because this could also help in overall digitalization of the economy, so enhancing more circularity in the business models, because some information which companies need, in particular in B2B conditions, the DPP could provide that. Having said that, we are working almost in parallel with what Commission is doing, because they are developing the requirements of DPP. They are working on the registry. So it's a kind of moving target. But the idea is that we could still help them as we did in Surpass 1. So this kind of information is useful for the Commission to see, because it comes from a direct industry experience. So the actors involved here are testing on the real life products and not just based on a study. So as I mentioned, the primary focus of the Surpass is the downstream value chain. So once a DPP is created, how it's used and how a different organization can make this data exchange to happen. Next slide, please. So the DPP objective is to basically have a more data economy, as I mentioned earlier. So even though the ESPR has a very specific requirements on certain information, so either they are only sustainability and circularity, or in terms of bill of material or product composition. So these has to be there. But the idea is also to make a link with other existing, I would say, non-mandatory data on which exist in the economy. So we know that there's similar actions are also being developed in the UN level. Also, certain other countries are also considering having a similar approach. So the idea is not to have something completely standalone, but something which could interact with the existing digital models and standards in the industry. And that's why the question of the ontology and the data models is very important. So what we are trying to see at this stage is how widely we can look at the DPP vision, which can help the not only the Commission but also the industry to integrate in their system. Next slide, please. So the objective of Surpass 2 in particular is to deploy and validate in a real life setting a DPP in the 4 target value chains as I mentioned. So textiles, electronics, construction, and tires. So we have 13 pilots which were identified during our proposal preparations, and all these pilots are on B2B activities that go in the sense of circular economy. And also we are supporting the ongoing standardization work under SEN or SENELEC, so JTC 24. We will also try to see if we can demonstrate cross-pilot interoperability, which is a bit challenging because at this stage we haven't heard anybody talking of this interoperability between different sectors. But if you think it from a circular economy perspective, that will be important. So if some of the waste by one of the pilot is become the resource for the another pilot, then it makes sense to show that those DPPs are aligned in certain ways. And then one of the most important element is to provide support to SMEs. So we have a dedicated work package to how SMEs could uptake the DPPs, because quite often they don't have the required human resources or even financial resources to develop and implement a DPP, because many of them may not have a full digital system in place. And then to see in the end how these 4 sectors work which we have done can be further expanded to other sectors, but also other EU regulations or even international regulations. So next, please. So as I mentioned, the project is directly linked to the ESPR. However, there's another parallel project going on, which is for the batteries DPP. So that's why we are not targeting batteries here, but we know that the batteries DPP will be the first one to arrive, I would say by late 26 or early 27. And then at the same time, the Surpass 2 is, as I mentioned, it's supporting various standardization actions right now, which are in process. But as you all are aware, work is being done at different levels, on one hand by the Commission, but also by the different actors in member states. So things can still change a bit. For example, the first delegated act on the DPP itself will arrive sometime end of 25. So which will precisely define, because right now what we are working on is the information and knowledge we have on one end from our previous Surpass, but also since the publication of the regulation in the official journal and the discussions we had with the Commission, because some of us were very actively involved also in the development of the ESPR itself. So we have an understanding of what is the philosophy behind the DPP. But putting it in a precise requirements, I think there can still be some changes. So as we go forward, I think we need to adapt our approach and its application. Next slide, please. So coming to these pilots, or what we call them lighthouse pilots. So each pilot has its own ecosystem of actors. So it has, of course, a leader which coordinates the work under the pilot. Then the upstream partners, so those will provide information regarding let's say the material or the resources which go in a product. And then, as I said, the major focus is the downstream B2B partners, so which will take these products, these DPP into their own DPP. And then various use cases, we are also looking at how companies will use this DPP, not necessarily only for data exchange, but also for their product design, for the development of their products, not only for compliance, but also to improve their products in general. Next slide. So here I list all the pilots which we are working on. So it's a very it's not very readable format, but what I wanted to show is that we have several pilots targeting textiles. 6. Then we have electronics. Also, we have 5, and then we have 1 for tires and 1 for construction products. So if you want some more information on these different pilots, I think if you press the slide, you will see the link on where you can get more information of each of the pilots. And we also have a video by the Surpass coordinator, Caroline, on the next slide, which gives you a little bit more information if you want to have a look at this video. So I think that was all from my side. I think there was one question regarding the construction products, that how it'll work. I don't know, Tim, if I have a slide which I could show on that, if it is possible.
Yeah, I think it's not possible without sharing it. So I recommend we take it during the Q&A, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shailendra. So more in the Q&A with you. And I just like to conclude a little bit, talk about our support offering. So yes, so what are the main changes that we will get with the ESPR? So you have seen we are talking about a much wider scope of application, moving beyond the energy-related products. We will have this new Ecodesign forum, which will be a major contributor to the implementation process. We will have a very thorough consideration of a number of issues that are related to circular economy and environmental sustainability. Remember those 16 product aspects. Shailendra was mentioning about the DPP and the Surpass 2 activities to be followed in order to see how the DPP will unfold, including for ESPR. Something I have not mentioned, but which is relevant in particular for textile sector at the moment, is the provisions addressing the destruction of unsold consumer products. So that should also be something you may want to look at if you are in the textile industry. But yeah, you should keep in mind that this is indeed only a framework regulation at this point. Therefore, a lot of uncertainties exist. But you can already see very much what can be regulated, and what are the product groups that are tackled as a priority. The European Commission is indeed in the driving seat here for ESPR implementation, so we have to wait for their next steps. Now, the next step is establishment of the Ecodesign Forum. The answers to the questions will often be product specific, and the requirements will differ from one product group to another. I have mentioned to you the horizontal requirements, though. Here we need to wait to what extent that will be used. Importantly, non-EU product manufacturers of regulated products will also be in the scope of ESPR. And also other non-EU suppliers may actually face requests from their customers and the value chain in the EU in order to provide data, required data. So what can you do at this point? There is definitely something that you can do in your companies. Of course, what you do today is get some intelligence, some input on the ESPR requirements. You have also seen there are a number of other requirements that may be of relevance for you that have been triggered by the European Green Deal. So I think this should be addressed holistically, also in the responsible departments in the companies. Of course, impact assessment is important to determine how could you be impacted and when. So that is something that we can also help you further with if you are interested to get more product specific support. Yeah. Overall, you have to raise awareness on all those new requirements, both within your company and also in your value chain. And this is really a stepwise process, the ESPR implementation, which requires constant monitoring and possible contribution to the preparatory work for the product groups you're interested in. And for the Surpass 2 in particular, I have noted here that you're able to participate as a stakeholder also. And some links for further information I've given to you on the right-hand side, which is mainly information prepared by REACH-Law, but also on the GRC preparatory studies, where you can register as a stakeholder to stay informed on your product-specific issues. Okay, then we look at the REACH-Law support services. So I should highlight that, of course, it's your business who has product expertise, who knows how to make products environmentally sustainable, and so basically improve environmental performance. But we can help you and guide you through the process. And now, in terms of ESPR, this means that we can help you, for example, participate in stakeholder consultations of JRC or the European Commission. We can monitor the developments for you and help you assess the impact. When it then comes to the more technical work, for example, when substance restrictions are envisaged, we could also help you with analysis of alternatives and economic analysis, which is something that we also have been doing under REACH, mainly for authorization and restrictions. More specifically for larger companies or companies with a large supplier network, and also for industry associations, we can provide training and awareness raising. So maybe this could be of interest. And if you have any tricky legal question, for example, which concerns your business in relation to ESPR, then feel free to ask us to analyze it. So it's a new regulation, so with many new questions coming up, and so you may be interested in clarifying some of the aspects. And beyond ESPR, I should note that we are also looking at REACH-Law and developing support on other requirements, such as the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and also some selected other EU sustainability requirements. Please feel free to ask if you should be in need of support here. Yes. And specifically for sectorial industry associations and companies with a complex product portfolio, we have a phased approach that we can offer you to get started with ESPR, which would start with a general memo about the impact on your activities, and then there would be a workshop conducted with you, where we work out more in detail what are the challenges and what are the needed actions for you to get prepared. And based on that workshop and the action plan, we could also provide further individual support as agreed. So, and with this, we still have more than 15 minutes, which is nice for questions and answers. So I hand over to Ferry.
Thank you, Tim. So I invite my colleagues to also come back online with their faces now that we go into the Q&A part. So, as discussed in the beginning, we will first go through these pre-submitted questions, and then we have a number of questions also submitted through the chat. And just an initial note, obviously you will not be able to click the links in the video, so we will add them to our YouTube video description. So we'll make note of that if you were wondering. Okay, so let's go into the questions. Are you gentlemen ready? Very good, very good. Okay, First one, are chemicals regulated by REACH, CLP detergent regulation, etc., affected by ESPR? If yes, how? Tim, do you want to take that?
Yes, of course. So indeed, detergents are candidate products for the first ESPR working plan. So this you find from the ESPR Article 18, paragraph 5, letter F. And you may find further information on the detergents also in the ESPR preliminary study by the JRC, which I have mentioned. So we will add a link to that, as mentioned by Fedi. And but REACH law is not aware of any ongoing preparations at the moment for ESPR delegated acts. I don't know, Shailendra, do you have anything to add to detergents regulation?
Okay.
No.
And Shailendra, please do chime in every time you have something to add, obviously.
Yes.
Question 2, what types of products does ESPR involve? And I think this was covered already, but Tim, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think this was explained at length. So we have the 11 product groups which are prioritized or proposed to be prioritized for the first ESPR working plan, and then an even broader group of products which you see from the JRC preliminary study. I have mentioned that pretty much any physical good which is placed on the EU market or put into service could be in scope of ESPR, unless one of those exemption cases applies, which I have noted. So yes, it's really wide, and that's why we also have this good participation here today.
Yeah, and also some of the exemptions were made because there is a parallel work going on the food and feed. So there's a farm to fork initiative, which is something like ESPR, but focusing on the food products. So in theory, nothing will escape, I would say, the product regulations.
Very good, thank you. And the next, a bit more specific question on fasteners. The fastener industry does not allow for many items to be purchased directly from an OEM, restricting transparency and our ability to obtain manufacturing or chemical composition data. We would like to understand ESPR distributor reportable obligations.
Yes. So yes, this is indeed a little bit of a tricky question. I would rather suggest that we address this specific question with the company asking bilaterally, because I mean I would need some more information to understand like the concern, and then link it to the provisions in ESPR. Of course, we have some general provisions on distributor obligations in ESPR Article 30. So, but I'm happy to see further with you how this is to be handled.
Yeah, I think the basic principle is that whichever actor puts it on the EU market for the first time, they are responsible. So whether it's a distributor, whether it's a manufacturer, whether it's a intermediate product supplier, so when it enters the single EU market for the first time, that's where the ESPR regulation will apply. At least that's how it was in the Ecodesign. So who brings it to the EU market, they are the responsible to fulfill all the obligations and to get required information from upstream if required.
But of course, downstream actors also have some related obligations.
Yes.
So I think they should be also looked into.
Okay, very good. Let's go to the next one. Which products do you believe will be prioritized in the first working plan?
Yes, I mean this was answered during the webinar. So we have I have said that there are 11 product groups which are currently listed in Article 18, paragraph 5 of the ESPR. And as I mentioned, that the Commission may decide to add some products or remove some products from the first working plan. and so we really have to await how this unfolds now. So I think it's one of the first key priorities for the Commission now to come up with this working plan, because we have a clear deadline in the law, 19th of April next year.
Yeah, so I have worked on the previous working plan under Ecodesign directive, and as explained, the main three criteria to be fulfilled is the market coverage. So it has to be larger volumes, significant environmental impacts, and significant potential for improvements. Those are the three principles followed. And then we evaluate. So when we say, let's say, iron and steel, it doesn't mean that the whole iron and steel is covered as such. So then you structure the market. You say how many of them are rods used in the construction, then steel sheets, and then you analyze the market for each of the product under the sector, and then you prioritize to see where they should target first and second and third. So based on these three criteria, the prioritization is done in the working plan.
Very good. Next question. Interested to understand in what regard ESPR is linked to interfaces with other laws. You covered this already, Tim, a bit, but please, if you can elaborate.
Yes, so yeah, I mean, it's a very wide question, but it's indeed also very valid. So yes, I have addressed the interface, mentioned the CSDDD, I've mentioned Green Claims Directive and REACH CLP. And what I can really recommend, if you're interested in this topic more generally, is to read the recitals to the ESPR regulation, which contains a lot of which gives ideas about the thinking of the legislature and how ESPR should interplay with other requirements. So. But yes, it's to be addressed per each regulation.
Very good. Shailendra, do you have anything to add, or are we happy with this?
Yeah, I think it will be product by product. So there are products which will be which will have, like, there's a question on construction products in particular. So I'd sent a slide which explains the idea is not to duplicate the effort. So let's say if batteries regulation already has a DPP requirement, so the ESPR DPP will kind of link with those DPP, and rather than doing it again the same process. And that, but at this stage, whatever I'm saying is based on our understanding and knowledge, but things can change because as I mentioned, that the delegated act on DPP is not there yet, which will define more precisely these interactions.
Okay, very good, thank you. And then a question on, will there be an alignment with this regulation in the UK? And if delayed, when likely?
Yes, so I mean, to me, this UK activities are not known in relation to ESPR. I checked a little bit for Northern Ireland, but for Northern Ireland, which is a little bit of a special case in terms of the Brexit, it's still to be confirmed whether they want to implement ESPR. But otherwise, I don't have information.
Yeah, it's more a political question.
Yeah, it's funny that in the question you already assume that it will be delayed. But anyway, let's go forward. So next to last question, would like to get more information about next steps for the select products, product groups, like the Ecodesign Forum, working plan, etc. Also covered, Tim, but if you can reiterate a bit.
Yeah, I mean, yes, to my understanding, we are now waiting for the Commission to launch their call for membership in the Ecodesign Forum in order to formally establish this body. And then maybe Shailendra knows more about the working plan activities.
Working plan is being developed by the JRC, so they are in charge of that part. Earlier, it was done more by consultants. So, and the main difference between the Ecodesign Forum and the existing consultation forum is that in the current forum, only trade associations and member states were allowed to participate, whereas the new forum will have also individual companies and experts and consultants. So it'll have a much wider audience as far as I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Last question in the pre-submitted ones. Any news what to expect in the electronics industry? Tim, do you want to go ahead and start?
Well, yes. I mean, starting again from the list of priority products in Article 18. So there's one product group which is information and communication technology products and other electronics. So they are a priority product group for the first ESPR working plan. But I do not have any information on actual commission work on eco-design measures for electronics. Of course, beyond those that are being addressed under the eco-design directive. I think Shailendra has mentioned a few pilots targeting electronics in Surpass 2.
Yeah, I think the main difference, because I think electronic sector was quite widely covered in the existing Ecodesign. However, it covered only the end products. Whereas under ESPR, I think there could be more obligation for component manufacturers, which was not the case in the existing Ecodesign. So that could be the new element for the electronics industry. But I think the industry is very familiar with the Ecodesign requirements for the products in which their components go.
Okay, thank you. That's the pre-submitted question. Then we have a slew of questions submitted during the webinar, so we'll not have time to go through all of them. I'll take some here. Start with the easier one. Do all chemicals immediately fall under the ESPR, or will the Commission also select them case by case?
Mm-hmm.
Tim,
yes. So. Yeah, well, as explained here, the Joint Research Center is carrying out this study on the product priorities, and does also like the scoping work as far as chemicals are concerned. So I have flagged in the previous slide the 3 groups of chemicals that are actually addressed. But this was before the stakeholder consultation, which took place in the beginning of 2023. What is the outcome after the consultation is not known to me. Maybe Shailendra knows more.
No.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a question on the digital product passports. This comes to you, Shailendra. So, and you already touched upon this a bit during the talk. So how will digital product passports affect the construction industry, where these environmental product declarations already have a strong foothold? The EPD methodology is described in ISO and EN standards, and they are quite widely adopted and used for life cycle assessments for buildings and other construction works.
Yes, I think I shared a slide. I don't know if that can be put up to illustrate a possible system. So I would say we don't have a definite answer to that, but one way could be that the DPP register interacts directly with the CPR database, where the information provided both on the declaration of performance, on the conformity, etc., to the DPP register, or the DPP itself can point to certain documents which are in the CPR database. So there are 2 possible ways it could interact. But as I said, the idea is not to duplicate, and I think it will be much easier for construction sector, because they are already taking some of these actions under the revised new construction product regulation. However, someone has mentioned that will the Surpass 2 system for DPP be applicable to construction products? So I would like to clarify that Surpass 2 is, we are illustrating how it could work, but it has no legal or compliance applicability on anything. What we are trying to show is how DPP could work in practice, but it's only for illustration and helping both the industry and the authorities. But what would apply in reality is what comes through the delegated act on DPP. So yeah, we should not get confused that Surpass, what we are doing in Surpass, will become like a mandatory way to do things.
Thank you, Shailendra, and you took the other question also there, so that's good. Quick question on the penalties, you talked about enforcement. Do we have clarity, Tim, on the penalties for non-compliance?
Not really. I mean, I don't have information on that. The regulation is freshly adopted, and so it's for the member states to implement their national provisions. I don't know what is already available under for the existing Ecodesign directive in the member states. So that's certainly part of a larger analysis.
Yeah, that's an area where I would say we are a bit weaker in the EU, because it varies a lot from one member state to another, the way market surveillance is conducted and the penalties are applied. So I think that's one of the reasons that ESPR goes beyond a static system to more dynamic system, so that the market surveillance people, they have necessary tools to check the compliance more easily, because when they are dealing with such a wide range of product portfolio, you cannot expect them to have knowledge of all the product and its compliance requirements. So the idea is to give also them the means to do this in a more efficient and easy manner.
Very good. I see that we are coming to the end of the webinar time-wise, so I'll just take a quick question here on DPPs. I see there are a lot of very complicated questions. We'll see how we can tackle those separately. The final question here is, if I use several products with DPP to make my product, do I need to communicate them to my customers?
No, you need to communicate only DPP of your product. So what goes inside your product, you will ask your suppliers to provide the DPP, but your obligation remains to communicate the DPP of the product which you are putting on the market, and not all the components which go into it. So you will need those DPPs, but you don't have to communicate them, unless those suppliers are putting those components or material directly on the EU market. Then yes, of course, they will have to provide that information. Again, with the disclaimer that this is how we understand it today. It could change tomorrow.
It could change, yes. Good to know. Thank you. And this is early days. I think that is quite clear in this webinar. Pertaining to ESPR and of course the DPP. How that will work in practice is of course very interesting to follow. So I think with that we will not take any more questions as we are out of time. So with that, Tim, if you take the next slide. I'd like to, of course, thank everyone for attending this webinar, and I hope you found it very useful. And there was one question about, are we sharing the slides? So we are not sharing the slides, but they will be available, the presentation on YouTube. So if you want to have a look at the slides, you can always stop the video and take a screenshot, etc. And of course, if you have questions, then feel free to contact Tim and of course Shailendra specifically on these questions. And I think some of the more complicated questions we got in the chat, we'll look and see how we can come back on you on those with answers to those questions. So thank you very much, Shailendra and Tim, for your expertise, and the biggest thanks of course goes to all you attendees for this webinar. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.